In 1812, the French zoologist Georges Cuvier declared that no large animals remained on Earth to be discovered. Every creature of significant size had, in his view, been catalogued. In the 2 centuries since, science has formally described the giant squid, the okapi, the mountain gorilla, the Komodo dragon, the saola, and the giant beaked whale, each of which was, in its own time, considered folklore. Cryptozoology is the study of animals whose existence is reported, but not scientifically confirmed. Most cryptids do not exist. Some eventually prove to be real. What follows is a guided descent through the layers of reported animals, from the famous to the obscure to the unrecorded. Tier 1, the famous cryptids that have entered general culture. Bigfoot. A large bipedal hominid reported across the Pacific Northwest of North America, with parallel traditions in many of the indigenous peoples of the region. The modern report cycle traces to a 1958 newspaper account of large footprints found near Bluff Creek, California. In 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin filmed what they claimed was a female Bigfoot crossing a creek bed at Bluff Creek. The Patterson-Gimlin film is the single most analyzed piece of cryptozoological evidence in history, frame by frame examination has produced contradictory conclusions. The film has neither been proven authentic nor proven hoaxed. In the half-century since, no body, no skeleton, no fur sample with intact DNA has ever been recovered. The species, by all available evidence, does not exist. The reports continue. The Loch Ness Monster. A large aquatic creature reported in the Scottish freshwater loch since at least the 6th century, when St. Columba is said to have encountered a water beast in the River Ness. The modern cycle began with a 1933 report by Mr. and Mrs. George Spicer of a large creature crossing a road near the loch. The 1934 photograph by Robert Wilson, the surgeon's photograph, became the iconic image. In 1994, the principal collaborator on the surgeon's photograph confessed before his death that the image was constructed using a toy submarine fitted with a plastic neck. Multiple sonar surveys of Loch Ness, including a 2003 BBC expedition using over 600 sonar beams, have detected no large biological object. The reports continue. The tourism economy of the loch depends on them. The creature, if it exists, has not been confirmed. The Yeti. A large hominid reported in the Himalayan regions of Nepal, Bhutan, and Tibet. The Sherpa people have documented oral traditions about the creature going back centuries. Western awareness traces to early 20th century mountaineering expeditions, including the 1921 expedition to Everest led by Charles Howard. Bury the expedition recorded large footprints in snow at high altitude. In 2014, a genetic analysis by Brian Sykes at Oxford University of supposed Yeti hair samples concluded that the samples most closely matched an unknown bear species. Subsequent analyses have suggested the samples were from known Himalayan brown bears and Asiatic black bears. Most likely, the Yeti tradition reflects encounters with bears at high altitude, where unusual visual conditions distort scale and behavior. The cultural tradition of the Yeti is robust and ancient. The biological species, in the form described, has not been confirmed. The chupacabra, Spanish for goat sucker, a creature first reported in Puerto Rico in 1995, said to attack livestock and drain their blood. The original reports described a reptilian barbed with spines along its back. Later reports, particularly from Texas and the American Southwest, described a different creature, canine, hairless, gaunt. The American chupacabra cases were, in nearly every confirmed instance, found to be coyotes or coyote, dog hybrids suffering from advanced mange, which removes their hair and produces an emaciated appearance. The Puerto Rican original is, in the view of most researchers, an urban legend created by overlapping cultural anxieties at a specific moment. Madeline Tolentino, the witness whose 1995 account is considered the origin, later acknowledged that her description bore strong similarity to a creature in the science fiction film Species, which she had watched shortly before her sighting. The chupacabra is a recent cryptid. Its origin in folklore is more documented than nearly any other cryptid in this catalog. At Tier 1, the famous cryptids have largely been investigated to the point of resolution. The cases that remain alive in popular imagination do so by inertia, by tourism economics, and by selective memory. Below this tier, the cases become less certain. Tier 2, the American cryptids. Regional creatures with strong local traditions, but less national exposure. The Mothman. Beginning in November 1966, residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reported sightings of a large winged humanoid with red glowing eyes. Sightings continued for 13 months. They ended on the 15th of December 1967, the day the Silver Bridge over the Ohio River collapsed, killing 46 people. John Keel, a journalist who investigated the sightings, framed the creature as a portent of the bridge disaster. The framing has shaped every subsequent account. Most ornithologists examining the original descriptions have concluded that the witnesses likely encountered a sandhill crane far outside its normal range, a large bird with a wingspan of over 2 meters that, in the dim lighting of the original sightings, could plausibly match the descriptions. The crane theory is unprovable. The disaster was real. The connection between them is folkloric, not causal. The Jersey Devil. A bipedal creature with leathery wings, hoofed feet, and a goat-like head, reported in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey for over 2 centuries. The earliest documented sighting traces to 1735, when a woman known in folklore as Mother Leeds is said to have cursed her 13th child, which immediately took demonic form and flew up the chimney. The Jersey Devil has had multiple panics, periods of widespread reported sightings, particularly in 1909, when hundreds of people across the region reported seeing the creature within the same week. The 1909 panic was, by subsequent research, largely a hoax orchestrated by 2 Philadelphia showmen, Norman Jeffries and Jacob Hope, who painted a kangaroo with paint and stripes to display as the captured creature. The hoax did not end the legend. The devil persists in regional folklore independent of any single hoax cycle. The skinwalker. In Navajo folklore, the Yi Naldlushi, with it he goes on all fours, is a witch capable of taking animal form. The term has been adopted by non-Navajo speakers and broadened in cryptid folklore. The Skinwalker Ranch in Uintah County, Utah, was the subject of a 2005 book by Colm Kelleher and George Knapp documenting decades of reported anomalous phenomena on the property. The ranch was investigated for several years by an unidentified private research organization. In 2017, the ranch was sold to a Las Vegas businessman, Brandon Fugel, who has since allowed broader publicity. The reported phenomena on the ranch include large unknown creatures, but also lights in the sky, electromagnetic anomalies, and reports of human disturbances. The phenomena reported are not consistent with a single cryptid. They are reported as a complex of disturbances that has not, despite repeated investigation, been resolved. The Beast of Bray Road. A bipedal canine creature reported in Walworth County, Wisconsin, beginning in the late 1982. The reports, compiled by local journalist Linda Godfrey, describe an upright wolf-like figure encountered at night on rural roads. Similar reports have come from Michigan, Ohio, and across the American Midwest under various names: the Michigan Dogman, the Pennsylvania Dogman, the Bluff Creek Dogman. The reports describe a similar archetype, a 4-meter tall canid that walks on 2 legs. No physical evidence has been recovered. The reports persist. They cluster in specific regions and along specific stretches of rural road, in patterns that suggest either a recurring sensory phenomenon or a sustained folkloric tradition with local color. The Fouke Monster. A bipedal hominid creature reported in and around Fouke, Arkansas, beginning in the 1950s, but achieving widespread attention with a 1972 docudrama film, The Legend of Boggy Creek. The film was, for a low-budget regional production, a substantial commercial success. It established the Fouke Monster as a regional brand. Reports of the creature continued sporadically into recent decades, though they have diminished significantly. The original witnesses have, in most cases, died. The successors of the original witnesses have not produced new evidence. The Fouke Monster is a case study in how a single piece of mass media documentation, in this case the 1972 film, can transform a local cryptid into a regional identity that outlasts the original sightings by decades. At Tier 2, the American cryptids overlap with regional folklore in ways that make them culturally durable. At Tier 3, the cryptids become more obscure, sometimes regional to a single state or county. Tier 3, the global catalog. Cryptids from around the world that are less famous to American audiences but well established in their regions of origin. The Tasmanian tiger. Dilocynus cynocephalus, a carnivorous marsupial endemic to Tasmania, declared extinct in 1936 when the last captive individual died in the Hobart Zoo. Despite the formal extinction, reports of sightings have continued for nearly 90 years. The animal is well attested in the historical record, including extensive film footage from the last decades of its known existence. In 2023, a research team at the University of Melbourne announced plans for de-extinction using preserved tissue samples. The species may yet return. Meanwhile, hundreds of post-extinction sightings have been recorded across Tasmania and even on the Australian mainland, where the species had been considered extinct for thousands of years before its formal mainland extinction. Most post-1936 sightings are likely misidentifications of feral dogs or unusual wallaby species. A persistent minority cannot be easily explained. The bunyip. An aquatic creature reported throughout Australian Aboriginal oral tradition and recorded in European settler accounts from the early 19th century onward. Descriptions vary: a seal-like creature, a long-necked horse, a dog-faced amphibian. The accounts come from inland water bodies, billabongs, swamps, river deltas. The bunyip is unusual among cryptids in that its existence is, in some forms of the tradition, supported by Aboriginal accounts that predate European contact. The diprotodon, an extinct giant marsupial that lived in Australia until approximately 45,000 years ago, has been suggested as a possible memory or fossil encounter basis for some bunyip traditions. No living bunyip has been confirmed. The Aboriginal tradition is older than the European cataloging of any other Australian cryptid. The Mongolian deathworm, Olgohorkoi, a red sausage-shaped creature reported by Mongolian nomads in the Gobi Desert, said to spit corrosive venom and to kill prey through electrical discharge. The first Western description came in 1926 from the paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews, who recorded the local traditions while leading expeditions to the Gobi. Multiple expeditions in the late 20th and early 21st centuries searched for the worm. None has produced a confirmed specimen. Skeptical analyses have suggested that the underlying creature may be a known reptile, perhaps Tartar sand boa, perhaps a worm lizard, that has been embellished in nomadic tradition. The death worm in the form described has not been confirmed. The Yeren, the wild man, a bipedal hominid reported in the mountainous regions of central China, particularly the Shenanjia forestry district in Hubei province. Chinese scientific organizations have, in the past, mounted formal expeditions to search for the Yeren. The People's Daily reported in 1980 that the Chinese Academy of Sciences was investigating the reports. The Yeren shares broad features with the Bigfoot and Yeti traditions: bipedal, large hair, covered, elusive. Chinese researchers have entertained the possibility that the reports reflect a surviving population of Gigantopithecus, an extinct great ape known from fossil teeth and jaw fragments found in Chinese caves. Gigantopithecus is estimated to have stood approximately 3 meters tall and gone extinct approximately 100,000 years ago. No living Gigantopithecus has been confirmed. The Yeren tradition continues. The Mokol Membem, a creature reported in the swamps and rivers of the Congo Basin, particularly Lake Tella in the Republic of the Congo. Western reports describe a long-necked aquatic animal, said by local peoples to live in the lake. Multiple Western expeditions, beginning in the early 20th century, have searched for the creature. The most discussed hypothesis is that Mokol Membem is a surviving sauropod dinosaur. The hypothesis is implausible. The Congo Basin has been continuously inhabited and surveyed for centuries. A surviving sauropod, an animal weighing tens of tons, would not have escaped formal documentation. More plausible explanations involve cultural traditions of large aquatic mammals, possibly hippopotamus, possibly large monitor lizards, augmented over generations of oral transmission. No physical specimen of any cryptid resembling Mokol Membem has been recovered. The Ahul, a massive bat-like creature reported in the rainforests of Java, Indonesia. Local descriptions estimate the wingspan at approximately 3 meters. The cry is said to be a distinctive ahul, giving the creature its name. Several Western naturalists, including ornithologist Ernest Bartels, in the 1920 seconds, recorded encounters consistent with the local traditions. No confirmed specimen has been recovered. The fauna of Java includes the giant flying fox, with a wingspan of nearly 2 meters, which may account for some ahul reports. The remaining reports remain unresolved. At Tier 3, the Global Cryptid Catalog reveals an interesting pattern. Most cryptid traditions involve large animals in regions of recent or ongoing biological discovery. As biological surveys complete, traditions persist. As remote regions become accessible, sightings diminish. The biological mystery and the cultural tradition often outlast each other in opposite directions. Tier 4, the aquatic. Cryptids reported from water, both freshwater and marine. The sea serpent reports. For over 1,000 years, mariners have reported encounters with enormous serpentine creatures at sea. Olaus Magnus's 1555 work on Scandinavian mythology described the Soe Orm. Hans Egid's 1734 account from Greenland described a sea monster of substantial length. The Bishop of Bergen, Erik Pontoppidan, in his 1752 Natural History of Norway, compiled dozens of sea serpent accounts from Norwegian fishermen. In 1817, dozens of witnesses in Gloucester Harbor, Massachusetts, including ship captains and town officials, reported an extended sea serpent observation lasting several days. The Linnaean Society of New England formally investigated. The investigation produced no specimen, but extensive sworn testimony. Modern analyses suggest that many sea serpent reports correspond to verified large marine animals, oarfish, basking sharks, giant squid, that were unknown to general European audiences when the reports were collected. The oarfish in particular can grow to over 8 meters in length and surface at moments of physical distress. The champ, a large aquatic creature reported in Lake Champlain on the border of Vermont, New York, and Quebec. Reports traced to indigenous Abenaki oral tradition. The first Western report is attributed to Samuel de Champlain himself in 1609, though textual analysis of his original journal indicates that he was describing what was likely an enormous gar, not a serpentine creature. In 1977, Sandra Mancy photographed what appeared to be a long-necked animal surfacing in the lake. The photograph has been analyzed in detail. Critics have suggested that the apparent neck is a piece of floating wood. Mancy herself maintained the photograph's authenticity until her death. Lake Champlain is large and deep. Modern sonar surveys have produced suggestive anomalies, but no confirmation of a large biological object. The champ tradition continues. The Ogopogo, a creature reported in Lake Okanagan in British Columbia, Canada. The First Nations Syilx and Okanagan peoples have an oral tradition about a lake-dwelling spirit, and Ik said to demand sacrifice from those who crossed the lake. Western reports of a creature began in the late 19th century. The lake itself is approximately 135 kilometers long and over 200 meters deep at its deepest point. A 1968 Sinan film by Art Folden of a wake in the lake has been examined repeatedly. The wake source has never been definitively identified. Multiple Canadian government bodies have considered formal investigations. None has reached a definitive conclusion. The lake supports a substantial tourism economy partially built around the creature. The Lake Tianchi monster, a creature reported in the Heaven Lake on the border between China and North Korea. The lake fills the caldera of an active volcano, Mount Paektu. The lake is approximately 2,189 meters above sea level. It is one of the deepest crater lakes on Earth. Reports of a creature in the lake date to 1903. They continue. In 2007, Chinese television footage captured what appeared to be 6 large animals swimming in formation in the lake. The footage has not been definitively identified. The lake is in a politically restricted zone. Full scientific surveys have not been possible. The Storsey, a creature reported in Lake Storsjön in central Sweden. The lake is the 5th largest in Sweden by area. Reports trace to 1635. Sweden's National Heritage Board formally protected the creature under nature conservation law in 1986. Then removed the protection in 2005 on the grounds that no specimen had been confirmed. The legal protection of an animal whose existence had not been confirmed remains a unique case in Western environmental law. The lake itself is large enough and cold enough to plausibly support large aquatic life. What lives there beyond the documented species is not known with certainty. At Tier 4, the aquatic cryptids cluster around large, cold, deep, sparsely surveyed lakes. The pattern is not random, it reflects the limits of what surface observation can confirm. Below this tier, the cryptids become harder to define. Tier 5, the anomalous, cryptids that do not fit neatly into ordinary biological categories. The black dog. In British folklore, the appearance of a large black dog is a portent of death. Different regions have different names. Black Shuck in East Anglia, the Gytrash in Yorkshire, the Padfoot in Lancashire, the Barghest in northern England. The reports are consistent across centuries. The dog is large, often described as the size of a calf. Its eyes glow red. It is associated with crossroads, cemeteries, and lonely paths at night. The cultural tradition is older than reliable Western documentation. The actual zoological referent, if any, is unclear. Some researchers have suggested that the tradition reflects encounters with wolves before British wolves went extinct in the 18th century. Others have suggested that the tradition is a folkloric form independent of any specific animal, drawing on the cross-cultural symbolism of black dogs as psychopomps, guides of the dead. The Alman, a winged humanoid reported in Monaghan, Cornwall in 1976. The earliest report came from 2 young sisters, June and Vicky Melling, who claimed to see a creature with feathered wings above the local church. The story was popularized by the writer Tony Dockshiels, whose accounts have been criticized as unreliable. Sightings continued sporadically for several years and then largely ceased. The Alman shares features with the Mothman of West Virginia, a winged humanoid associated with a specific locality and a particular time period. The Alman has not been resolved. Dockshiels' involvement in the original reporting casts substantial doubt on the original accounts. The local churchyard has become a minor pilgrimage site. The Pope Lick monster, A creature reported under a railway trestle near Louisville, Kentucky. The legend describes a hybrid figure, part man, part goat, with an axe, who lures visitors onto the trestle to be killed by passing trains. The creature itself has not been confirmed. Multiple humans have died on the trestle over the decades. However, attempting to investigate the legend, the trestle is active. Trains use it. People who climb onto it during an oncoming train cannot reach safety in time. The legend has, by some accounts, become its own cause. People die trying to verify the cryptid that the legend describes. This is a recurring pattern in cryptid folklore. The legend's verification effort itself produces casualties. The Wendigo. In Algonquian mythology, the Wendigo is a malevolent spirit or creature associated with winter, starvation, and cannibalism. It is said to possess humans who resort to cannibalism, transforming them physically and psychologically. The tradition is well documented in the ethnographic record of the Cree, Innu, Ojibwe, and related peoples across northern North America. The Wendigo in the original tradition is not strictly a cryptid. It is a spiritual being with cryptozoological features. The historical record contains documented cases of Wendigo psychosis, a culture bound syndrome in which Algonquian individuals exhibited symptoms consistent with believing themselves to be transforming into Wendigos. Whether the syndrome was a real psychiatric phenomenon, or whether it has been overstated by Western ethnographers, remains a subject of academic debate. The black-eyed children. Beginning in the late 1992 internet era, reports describe encounters with children, typically pale-skinned, who request entry to homes or vehicles. The defining feature is that the children's eyes are entirely black, no visible iris or sclera. Witnesses report an overwhelming sense of dread during the encounters. The black-eyed children phenomenon emerged from a 1998 email from Texas journalist Brian Bethel describing his own encounter. The story spread rapidly through internet forums. Subsequent reports have circulated since. None has been verified outside the first-person narrative form. The phenomenon is a modern folkloric artifact. Whether it has any basis in actual experience is, in researchers' views, indeterminate. It may be a recent culture, bound experience triggered by the original Bethel story. It may be an older folkloric form, the changeling, the doppelganger, adapted to contemporary contexts. At Tier 5, the cryptids cross from zoological to ontological. They are reported as experiences as much as observations. What is being reported is no longer always a creature. Sometimes it is a state, sometimes it is a presence, sometimes it is something the witnesses cannot define. Tier 6, the disturbing, reports that, by their nature, are uncomfortable to investigate. The Goatman. Multiple traditions exist around a goat-headed humanoid figure in American folklore. The Pope-Lick monster mentioned earlier is one variant. The Maryland Goatman said to roam Beltsville, Maryland is another variant. Variants exist in Texas, Wisconsin, and several other states. The Maryland Goatman tradition is alleged to involve a real laboratory at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. According to the legend, an experiment on a goat went wrong and produced a half-human hybrid. The research center itself is real. It has worked on goats. The experiment of the legend is not documented in any record. The legend persists. The center is an active research facility. The Bunny Man. A creature reported near a railway bridge in Fairfax County, Virginia. The legend describes a man in a rabbit costume who attacks visitors with an axe. The tradition is documented to specific events in 1970, in which a man in a rabbit suit was reported to have threatened individuals on Colchester Road. The original 1970 events were investigated by police. The reports were taken seriously. The man in the rabbit suit was never identified. Subsequent legend has woven the documented 1970 events into broader folklore about a permanent supernatural entity at the bridge. The original real-world events are documented. The contemporary legendary elaboration is not the same as the original events. The Indrid Cold reports, during the period of Mothman sightings in West Virginia in 1966 and 1967, a separate cluster of reports involved encounters with a humanoid figure who identified himself as Indrid Cold. The figure was said to wear a metallic suit to communicate telepathically and to appear in association with the Mothman events. The principal witness, Woodrow Derenberger, reported a roadside encounter on the 2nd of November, 1966. Derenberger's account was investigated by John Keel and others. Derenberger maintained his account until his death in 1990. No corroborating physical evidence was ever recovered. The Indrid Cold reports overlap with UFO folklore. The boundary between cryptid and UFO contact narrative in some cases is artificial. The reporting communities draw the line. The original witnesses often did not. The Slender Man. A tall, thin, faceless humanoid figure with elongated arms. The figure was created in 2009 by Eric Knudsen, an internet user posting under the name Victor Surge on the Something Awful forums. Knudsen produced 2 photoshopped images and a short fictional caption. The Slender Man is in origin indisputably a piece of fan fiction. The character spread rapidly through internet forums, becoming a foundational element of online horror narratives. In 2014, 2 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, attempted to murder a third girl, stabbing her 19 times, in what they later told police was an attempt to gain favor with the Slender Man, whom they believed to be real. The victim survived. The attackers were convicted of attempted homicide. The case represents one of the most documented instances in which a fictional cryptid produced real-world violence. The fictional origin of the figure was, in the perpetrator's belief system, irrelevant. The cultural object had become, in their minds, a presence with demands. At Tier 6, the cryptids interact with human behavior in ways that produce consequences. The line between belief and effect is, in some of these cases, no line at all. Tier 7, the bottom of the iceberg. At the bottom of every cryptid iceberg sit reports that are either single witness only, never verified, or that, if real, would represent a category of being that science has no framework for. These are the unsorted edges, the reports that do not fit elsewhere on the chart. The Boquerón sightings. In the late 1992s and early 2000s, a series of sightings around the Bay of Bahía de Banderas in Mexico described an unknown bipedal creature in mangrove swamps. The witnesses included local fishermen and a small number of tourists. No physical evidence was recovered. The sightings clustered around a specific bay, then ceased. Such cluster patterns, localized, temporally bounded, witness confined, recur throughout the cryptid literature. They are statistically what would be expected from either a real but transient phenomenon or a sustained period of misidentification. The Boquerón cluster has not been resolved. Most sightings of this type are not. The Dover Demon. A creature reported by 4 teenagers in Dover, Massachusetts, on the night of the 21st of April 1977. The 4 witnesses in separate cars at different times that night all described a small, hairless, humanoid creature with a large head and luminous eyes. The witnesses produced detailed sketches independently. The sketches were similar. The original investigators, Lauren Coleman and others, concluded the witnesses were credible. The sightings were never repeated. No physical evidence was recovered. The Dover Demon has remained an unresolved case for nearly 50 years. The case is unusual in that the witnesses were not strangers to each other, were not in the same location, were credible by the standards of the investigators, and produced convergent, independent accounts. The case has not been replicated. The witnesses are now in their 60s. The Hopkinsville Goblins. On the 21st of August 1955, the Sutton family in Kelly, Kentucky, reported a sustained encounter with small humanoid creatures around their farmhouse. The Sutton family fired guns at the creatures throughout the night. The creatures, when shot, were reportedly knocked down but not killed. They returned. The Suttons fled the farm in the middle of the night and reported the encounter to police, who took the report seriously. Multiple law enforcement officers visited the property. They reported physical evidence consistent with the Sutton family's account. Broken windows, damaged screens, scratches on the porch. They did not see the creatures themselves. The Hopkinsville case has been investigated for nearly 70 years. The family's account has remained consistent. No conclusive explanation has been produced. Some skeptics have proposed the family encountered great horned owls. The family rejected the explanation. The case remains open in the cryptid literature. The category problem. At the bottom of the cryptid iceberg sits a structural question. If a creature is genuinely unknown to science, science has no framework to describe it. If a sighting cannot be replicated, science cannot confirm it. The methodological commitments of biology are incompatible with the single witness anomalous report. This does not mean unknown animals do not exist. It means that what would constitute scientific evidence of their existence requires repeated, attested, physically recoverable instances. By that standard, the famous cryptids covered in this episode are not confirmed. By a different standard, the historical standard, the witness. Testimony standard, the cultural tradition standard, they have been attested for centuries. The new species per year. Science formally describes approximately 15,000 to 20,000 new species per year. The vast majority are insects, small invertebrates, and microorganisms. Approximately a dozen new vertebrate species are described annually. Most of the new vertebrate species are small and live in remote habitats. A small number are large. In the past 3 decades, science has described the saola, an Asian forest bovid, the Annamite striped rabbit, the Sulawesi cuscus, the giant beaked whale. Each was until its formal description, a cryptid. The cryptid category is not closed, it is the staging ground for animals that have not yet been formally described. At the surface, you have the famous cryptids, Bigfoot, Nessie, the Yeti, the Chupacabra, creatures that have entered general culture and that have largely been investigated to the point of resolution. Beneath the surface, the American regional cryptids and the global catalog from around the world. Beneath that, the aquatic cryptids that cluster around large, cold deep, sparsely surveyed lakes. Beneath that, the anomalous reports that cross from zoology into something harder to define. Beneath that, the disturbing reports that interact with human behavior to produce real consequences. And at the bottom, the unresolved cases that scientific method has no framework to confirm or refute. 2 centuries ago, the giant squid was a sea monster. The okapi was a unicorn, the mountain gorilla was a phantom. Each one was in its time a cryptid. Each one is now in the formal biological record. The catalog is not closed. The reports continue. Most will turn out to be folklore, some, in the next century will turn out to be species.